presentation of ABC Sports.
For a quarter of a century, Pete Rose has been making headlines. Beautiful ones, such as in 1985 when he supplanted Ty Cobb as baseball's all-time career hit leader. And more recently, ugly ones that tell us an inglorious end to a fabled career is a strong possibility.
I'm happy to look in the camera now and say I never bet on baseball, and I never bet on Cincinnati Red baseball.
There is evidence, substantial and heavily corroborated evidence, that Mr. Rose bet large sums of money on Major League Baseball games and on games of the Cincinnati Reds.
While innocence or guilt must still be established, evidence such as these supposed betting slips has kept mounting.
There are 9 witnesses. In one way or another, give information about Pete Rose betting on baseball or the Reds.
11 days ago, an April letter sent by Baseball Commissioner Bart Giamatti to U.S. District Judge Carl Rubin in Cincinnati, lauding Rose's alleged bookmaker Ron Peters for candid, forthright, and truthful testimony to baseball's investigators, was the key to Rose obtaining a temporary restraining order.
It therefore appears to this court at this point that the Commissioner of Baseball has prejudged Peter Edward Rose. We further find that the hearing set tomorrow in New York before the Commissioner of Baseball would be futile and illusory, and the outcome a foregone conclusion.
At this moment, the matter has turned into a jurisdictional dispute, and as Rose's lawyers left the Columbus federal courtroom yesterday in the hopes of returning the case to a state court, it is business as usual for the Cincinnati Reds, who come into Shea Stadium in New York tonight to meet the Mets. Shea Stadium will be almost sold out tonight, but the question is, can this game be gotten in? Because as you look at the dark skies, it's raining in the New York area, but not at Shea Stadium at the moment. As the crowd packs Shea Stadium, the grounds crew, as you can see down the third base line, they are at the ready. But we'll get started on time at the outset anyway as the Reds take on the New York Mets. I'm Al Michaels. Welcome to the final series before the All-Star break, and the Mets are certainly happy to be home after a road trip on which they lost 6 of 9. But the Mets have played extremely well at Shea Stadium, and they'll play 31 of their next 45 games here. But right now they are 3 games back of Montreal and more injury problems with Dwight Gooden on the disabled list. As far as the Reds are concerned, despite the Pete Rose situation, they led the National League West for much of April and May, but have fallen upon very hard times. Cincinnati has dropped 16 of its last 24, and last night the Reds lost to the Phillies on a 10th inning passed ball. So Cincinnati comes in to start this 4-game series in 3rd place, 6 games behind the San Francisco Giants. Tim McCarver, let's talk about the Reds and Pete Rose. And in your estimation, what effect has the Rose situation had on the play of this ball club, especially lately?
Well, early, I think no effect. As a matter of fact, the Cincinnati Reds in first place 39 days, but they haven't been in first place since June 10th. From the players that I've talked to, it's not the game on the field that's bothering them, but more the preparation of the game. As a matter of fact, in the Cincinnati clubhouse tonight, there were reporters all over the place. As a matter of fact, some of the guys couldn't even get to their lockers. And what about the argument that Pete Rose is deflecting a lot of the pressure from his players? If that's true, then what happens when Pete Rose has to make a nuts and bolts baseball decision? Does he think more about what's going on in court, more about the legal proceedings of his case? I think General MacArthur said chance favors a prepared man, and I don't think the Reds are prepared to play the type of baseball they're capable of without the legal proceedings surrounding Pete Rose.
I agree with you, and of late, as we say, having problems. So are the Mets, and let's turn to Jim Palmer. Davey Johnson has problems, though, of a much different sort. physically. He's lost Gary Carter and Keith Hernandez. Everybody knows about that. But now, for the first time in his career, Dwight Gooden is on the disabled list. Can they withstand that loss?
Well, that's one of the things that Davey Johnson, I always think of death taxes and Dwight Gooden. You can always count on him. He's 9-4, no doubt would have been at the All-Star game in Anaheim next week. But he's on the disabled list 4 to 6 weeks. They don't know exactly how long it'll be, but at least that time period. But, you know, the one thing about the Mets, you could always count on their pitching staff. And Davey Johnson was bemoaning tonight. He said, hey, last year I had David Cone 20-3. Well, he's 5-5 with an ERA over 4 runs a game. In fact, the only starter he's had all year that's pitched well is Sid Fernandez, other than Dwight Gooden. So tonight we will see one of those endless streams, Al, of good young pitchers. David West, 24-year-old left-hander, has good as stuff as anybody in the National League, but he's inexperienced.
Baseball tonight at Shea and in Chicago. Just to fill you in on the other sports news of the day, the National Football League owners are meeting, attempting to select a new commissioner. At the moment, they are meeting behind closed doors. A likely choice, as most of you know, would be Jim Finks, who is the president of the New Orleans Saints. Nothing has happened as of the moment. We do have Lynn Swan and a crew in Chicago. Should something take place during the game, we'll have it for you immediately. But settle back now for baseball. Thursday night baseball from Shea Stadium in New York. Danny Jackson off the disabled list, pitching for the Reds, and David West for the Mets.
ABC's Thursday Night Baseball. Brought to you by Miller Lite. When it's Miller Lite, less filling tastes great. And by the heartbeat of America, today's Chevrolet.
So the New York Mets about ready to take the field at Shea Stadium. Again, very ominous skies, and it's raining in parts of the New York area. But the teams were able to take their normal batting practice and infield. And they have rolled the tarp back, at least for the moment. So momentarily, the Mets will be taking the field, coming staggering home after dropping 2 of 3 to Houston and losing 6 of 9 overall at Montreal, Cincinnati, and in the Astrodome. Lineups tonight, the Reds are trying to shake things up. They haven't been hitting. They also have some injuries. Luis Quinones to lead off, and Todd Benzinger at first base bats second. Barry Larkin named to the All-Star team today, bats third. And Eric Davis will be going to Anaheim as well as a reserve outfielder, hitting fourth. Rolando Rooms gets the start in right field. Night off for Paul O'Neill. Joel Youngblood gets the start in left field. Night off for Cal Daniels. Marty Brown, just called up from the minors last week, is the third baseman. Jeff Reed will do the catching because Bo Diaz has been bothered by a knee problem. And so Reed will get the start against the lefty, and the pitcher is Danny Jackson. The meeting at home plate, Tommy Helms, one of the Reds coaches and former second baseman, and another former second baseman, Mets manager Davey Johnson, for the exchange of lineup cards. Jim Quick is back of the plate. Jerry Lane at first, Jerry Davis, the umpire, at second, and Eric Gregg at third. So the Mets, back of David West, the outfield of Kevin McReynolds, Juan Samuel, who came over from the Phillies last month in center. Darryl Strawberry still bothered with the toe injury, and so Mark Carrion starts in right. Howard Johnson having a great year. He's the third. Kevin Elster is the shortstop. Greg Jeffries is the second baseman. And Tim Tuffle is at first base. Dave Magadan hurt his back last night, and he's on the shelf for at least a few days. Phil Lombardi, who was in the minor leagues a couple of weeks ago, is back of the plate. And David West, who was in the minor leagues last month, is on the mound as the Mets are fielding a half Tidewater lineup tonight.
I think that, Tim, you said it very well. This looks like a B squad. Of course, the guy, Fritz, and you're looking at him right now, David West, is not a B squad pitcher. 12-4 last year at Tidewater, was down there this year, 7-4. Only one major league start. This will be his second, and that was last September when he won 1-0. Take a look at his minor league stats, and you can see he's progressed. A guy with an overpowering fastball, a little bit of a slurve, a changeup that he probably throws and will control better than that breaking ball. A live fastball, which leads to control problems.
And you can see with those numbers, the one thing that those numbers don't tell you is how he's improved in his control over especially the last 2 years. That was his bugaboo. He walked over 100 3 years ago, but he has improved on his 6-6, and he throws very, very hard.
He's facing the Reds for the second time in a week because he's spelling Gooden tonight in what would be Dwight's spot in the rotation, and it was West who came out of the bullpen in Cincinnati on Saturday when Dwight had to leave in the third inning. So the Reds in the first inning, and there is Dwight Gooden, and they think that Gooden will be on the shelf for a month to 6 weeks, is the report right now. Quinones, Benziger, and Larkin in the first inning. Quinones, the switch hitter, takes outside. As a right-handed batter, he's hitting .258 and .213 overall. One of the reasons Quinones is in the lineup and has been seeing a lot of action, the Reds are minus 2 starters in their infield. Chris Sabo, the third baseman, is on the disabled list and due back shortly. And Ron Oster, the second baseman, is also on the DL. Next pitch is strike, and the count is 2-1. Quinones, who'd basically be your prototypical utility man, has really bounced around. And the count 2 balls and 2 strikes.
Puerto Rico? I'd say Puerto Rico. That's their whole utility. Guys are all played at Nashville last year.
Grounded to short. Kevin Elster straightens up and takes care of Quinones. So 1 down here in the first inning. And Todd Benziger comes to the plate. The Reds pretty much along the line of the Mets this season, riddled with injuries. Cal Daniels has missed a lot of time. Eric Davis has missed a lot of time. And with Oster and Sabo on the DL, here's one guy that Rose has been able to count on. Benziger coming over from the Red Sox, and he's played in almost every game. Switch hitter. So Rose bringing his Reds into New York. The Mets have won 5 of the 8 meetings between these two teams this year, and this series will wrap up the competition between New York and Cincinnati for 89. One and one. Benziger with the Red Sox up until last winter, and then he came over to the Reds in the deal that sent, among others, Nick Saski to Boston. And he's done the everyday job at first base for them, and very capably. 2-1. Fouled away. Now, Tim, you and I were talking about this before the game. If you're a baseball fan and have been for a few years, take a look at Todd Benziger.
Oh, boy.
And his countenance, and who does he remind you of? He looks just like another former first baseman. That's a hint.
Wes Parker of the Los Angeles Dodgers. We didn't give you long to think about it.
No, not at all. From either side of the plate, both switch hitters.
First baseman, both first basemen.
In the air to center field and right into the glove of Juan Samuel.
I think the key question, can he play bridge?
That's right. Parker was a master.
And can he act?
Yes. Chicago this afternoon at Wrigley Field beat San Diego 7-3. 8th win of the year for Greg Maddux. Walt Terrell was the loser. Ryan Sandberg, Andre Dawson, and Sean Dunston hit home runs. Last Thursday, those three were on the bench as Don Zimmer shook up his lineup in San Francisco to no avail last Thursday night, but the Cubs then went on to win the remaining 3 games in that series. Barry Larkin, second to Tony Gwynn in hitting in the National League and named to the All-Star team earlier today. Hits it slowly to third, and Howard Johnson, who's also on the All-Star team, is there to throw him out. 1-2-3 inning, Reds gone in order, and the Mets come up in the bottom of the first.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Juan Samuel leads off in center, and Mark Carrion spells Darryl Strawberry in right. Howard Johnson, sensational year, hitting third. The cleanup hitter is Kevin McReynolds. He moves into Strawberry's spot in the order. Tim Tuffle plays first base because Dave Magadan has the bad back. Greg Jeffries, in his first full season in the big leagues, at second base. Phil Lombardi, a one-time Yankee, now a Met, does the catching. Kevin Elster is the shortstop. And you just saw David West set the Reds down 1-2-3 in the top of the first inning. For the Reds, Again, they give Daniels and O'Neill the night off, and so the revamped outfield has Davis in center, but he's flanked by Joel Youngblood and Rolando Runes, with Marty Brown, the rookie, at third, Larkin and Quinones, the double play combination, and Benziger at first. Jeff Reed does the catching, and Danny Jackson comes off the disabled list to make his first start in about 3 weeks.
That he does. He had 2 problems: carpal tunnel syndrome, which is a nerve problem in his left wrist, and also some tendonitis of the capsule in the left shoulder. So the results have not been good. You're looking at a guy second last year in Cy Young voting, won 23 games, only 8 losses. ERA under 3 runs a game, and he's had a very problematic type of year, and not a lot of support, but really has not pitched that well. Highest earned run average in the National League, over 6 runs a game. 603.
Juan Samuel, who's looking to get healthy, takes a strike. Samuel coming over from the Phillies, but as a Met, and there are his cumulative numbers, he's only hitting, as you see, 174. 8 for 46. 1-1 the count.
A couple of the problems that Jackson's had with his wrist and shoulder, he also had problems with his push-off foot. And he is a power pitcher. Watch him lose the bottom part of his body.
Samuel grounds it down to second, and Quinones throws him out. So the leadoff hitter is taken care of. Samuel out number 1 in the first inning, and Mark Carrion coming to the plate.
Mark Carrion.
I think the one thing you have to talk about, in fairness, with Danny Jackson was the need to go on the disabled list. The reason, or one of the reasons, for his early season failure. I mean, maybe the arm was bothering him. He had a shot in his big toe, his left big toe, his push-off foot. Maybe his arm was bothering him before he let anybody know, or before the wear and tear began to show. And then you're too deep. You're 5-9, and you have to really climb your way out of the hole.
Jackson's first pitch inside, ball 1.
And the way you try to do that is win 3 or 4 games in one start. You're always saying, hey, I'm 1-6. I got to win tonight. And you're always looking down the road instead of immediately for the game you're pitching. Exactly. And as a hitter, you try to go 5 for 3 every game.
1-0 to Carrion, missing low, ball 2.
Interesting thing about hitting, though, is that if you get in a slump early in the year, Cal Ripken, who just made the All-Star team, was hitting about 130. Now he's averaged up to 285, 10 home runs. Nobody forgets, really remembers that slump. You can't erase the 9 losses. They're going to be on your record all year long.
Well, the managers and the league officials who picked the reserves forgot all about Ripken's slump because he was named to the American League team today. Carrion draws ball 4. So Mark walks on 4 pitches. And Howard Johnson comes to the plate. A classic case of the old saw about some of the best deals you make are the ones you never make. Rumored to be going everywhere during the offseason. He stays. And where would the Mets be without him?
I mean, even if they had gotten Mark Langston, and that was a major trade, just got to wonder. I mean, that's why Jim Lefevre up in Seattle was so upset. He said, I want Howard Johnson. Here's a guy that could hit 40 home runs in the Kingdome and also steal 40 bases. That type of player.
Wrapped foul, and Sam Perlazzo has to do a little jig to get out of the way. I bet you Sam is pretty adept on the dance floor.
You better be if you're a third base coach.
Or a first base coach and McCovey's in the box or somebody like that. That's grounded down to Quinones. Taylor-made DP to Larkin and back to Benziger, and that's that for the Mets in the first inning. At the end of 1, no score. Back we come to Shea after this message and a word from our ABC stations. Second inning in New York with the rumble of thunder in the background, but it's dry. And on we go as Eric Davis starts the second inning. He'll be followed by Rolando Runes and Joel Youngblood. Davis named as an all-star reserve today. Eric, a great player. The problem with him through the years, of course, has been durability. He always misses a lot of games, and this year is no exception. He's already missed 21. As we are just about at the halfway mark. 3-0 the count. But here's a guy who misses 21 games, and there it is in 86. He played 2/3 of the time, a little bit more than 3/4 in 87. 4 out of 5 last year. And the problem's this year. And he's the type of guy that will get the green light 3-0 as he does there, 3-1.
Also, the green light when he gets on first is steal, and I think that's one of the problems. Doesn't appear that he has the type of body that can sustain the type of trauma a base stealer has to take.
Davis draws the walk to start the second inning. And speaking of the all-star team,
Right fielder, number 36.
starters announced yesterday, and there they were. Will Clark was the leading vote getter, and Darryl Strawberry was named to the starting outfield but will not play. Reserves named today: Glenn Davis, Pedro Guerrero, Willie Randolph, Bobby Bonilla. There's Howard Johnson, Tim Wallach, Barry Larkin, Vince Coleman, Eric Davis, Andre Dawson, Vaughn Hayes, Tony Pena, and Mike Socha are the reserve catchers. And the pitchers, Tim Burke and Mark Davis. John Franco from the Reds will be there. 2 Dodgers, Oral Hershiser and Jay Howell. Rick Russell of the Giants. Mike Scott, 14-game winner. John Smoltz from Atlanta. And the wild thing, Mitch Williams from the Cubs. Rooms pops it up. And Jeffries, the second baseman, takes care of it at the edge of the outfield grass. 1 down in the second inning with Davis at first base. And Joel Youngblood comes to the plate.
Left fielder, number 12.
You mentioned Rick Russell. I believe Rick Russell is starting the Giants against the Pirates tonight, and he's likely to be the starter Tuesday in Anaheim for the National League. Having another terrific year at age 40.
And Pittsburgh leading that game 1-0 at the end of 3.
Well, that'll keep the strikeout total down, but they'll hit a lot of ground balls. It's going to be a probably a 5-25 game out there.
Youngblood gets hit by the pitch. So Joel, who began his big league career with the Reds in 1976 and hasn't been with them since, coming back on the back end of his career, gets hit by the pitch here, and runners are at first and second.
A lot of times the slider inside will freeze the hitter, and that appears to be what happened to Youngblood then. I guess a lot of times, Jim, a pitcher will grip the breaking ball too tightly, and that's what it appeared that David did there.
Well, it also freezes him, but he had not seen anything. You know, he's looking for the ball.
Yeah.
And a good slider, you really don't pick up the tight spin, even though I would say West's slider's a little bit more of a slurve. You do have runners in first and second, 1 on a walk and 1 on a hit batsman.
First threat of the game is Marty Brown, who in his brief stint with the Reds this season is 2 for 6. Mel Stottlemyre along with Dave Johnson looking on as they hope West can extricate himself from the game's first jam. No score in the second. Got the corner in the count, 1 ball and 1 strike.
You saw Davis, what he's doing is trying to lull West into a nonchalant attitude. You saw him with his hands on his legs the first 2 pitches. But he looked like he was going to run more on the second pitch than he did the first one.
There's Elster keeping him close. Feeding over toward the middle at second. As Brown looks at another strike, and the count is 1-2.
West, who's 6'6", already takes probably a little bit more time to get to home plate than normal pitchers. And when you look back there and you see Davis, you rush a little bit more. Probably won't hurt him on the fastball, but it will hurt him on the breaking ball.
Half swing, and they appeal. Don't get the call at first base from umpire Jerry Lane. And Brown is still alive. So they count 2 balls and 2 strikes. Lane says no. So 2 on, 1 out on the count, 2-2.
That good breaking ball you were talking about, Tim, and again, he gets fooled. Tough to tell from this angle. The first base umpire had a lot better call. You see Phil Lombardi saying, hey, let's have a little help. Jerry Lane says no.
Davis at second, Youngblood at first. No score in the second inning. And the 2-2 pitch bounces away from Lombardi, and the runners each move up 90 feet as Davis pulls in at third. And Youngblood is now at second. And the count is 3-2 on Marty Brown.
A lot of times, a young catcher will be reluctant to call for the breaking ball if something like this happens to get a runner to third base. The reason for that is he doesn't want it to happen again. This is only the 10th start of Lombardi's major league career. So I would suspect that he'll go back to the fastball. Really went after that ball with the glove. Whenever you see a catcher reaching for a ball in the dirt with the glove, it's the incorrect way to go about it.
Infield is back. Ground ball would score a run. There's a base hit down the left field line. Davis comes in to score. Youngblood comes in to score. Brown on his way to second, diving in with a double. So Cincinnati takes the lead on the game's first hit and first RBIs for Marty Brown.
Take another look at the double, and as Timmy said, maybe a little reluctant to throw it, but he does throw a breaking ball. But what he does, he guides it because he bounced the one. He also got to hit batsman. So what happens, instead of making a good pitch, he throws it belt high, and the result, a two-run double.
So the reason he threw the hanger on 3-2, I think a case could be made, was because he threw the 2-2 breaking ball in the dirt.
And for Brown, his first runs batted in his brief stint this year with Cincinnati. He had 2 last year when he came up for a brief spell in September. Reed takes inside, ball 1. Here's a case of the Reds wanting to go with Bo Diaz tonight because he's the right-handed batter. But with Diaz's knee acting up, and it might have to be drained, they have to go lefty against lefty. Inside, ball 2.
I think one of the irritants with manager Davey Johnson is the fact that he feels he has a veteran pitching staff, with the exception of David West, Mel Stottlemyre to Davey's right, and they should, regardless of who's catching, whether it's Barry Lyons or Phil Lombardi, be able to be mature enough, professional enough to not blame the catcher. And there's been a number of, I guess, nuances and things said behind and in the press and so forth that maybe the reason the Mets aren't pitching up to snuff is because of the catching. Davey doesn't agree with that. These guys are too good to do that, in his opinion.
But tonight you have a different situation because you have a young pitcher and a young catcher. And there's Gary Carter, who should return sometime around August 1st.
In there to Reed, and the count 2-1.
He said another week, or another 2 weeks, and then another week to get in shape, which is, of course, what he's doing, conditioning the legs, strengthening it.
Carter out here tonight taking batting practice. And it has begun to rain. Strike on the inside corner, and the count 2-2. So some of the crowd now scurrying for cover.
Talking about Gary Carter, it's funny how some people are, even baseball people. Last year they complained about Carter's lack of offensive production. This year the Mets don't have him, and they're complaining about the pitching staff not having Gary Carter.
It's always something.
Yeah.
In the air to right field and deep, Carrion goes back and makes the catch, and for some reason Brown, and there's his base running inexperience showing, he was all the way to third base. Instead of tagging up at second, he would have been able to advance easily to third. But there's a case of Brown just called up to the big leagues and base running a la AAA.
You know, it looked like he thought there were 2 outs. Let's see. See, he started running immediately when the ball was hit, and then he stopped towards third. The proper way, you go about a third of the way, and that gives you a chance to go back, tag up if the ball is caught, because no way Carrion can throw him out, even if you're a little off of second base.
So Brown still at second as Danny Jackson fouls it away. Jackson, as a hitter this year, is 6 for 28, all singles. And he's hot. Oh, for his first 14.
Well, he looked at his record.
For his last
he
14.
said, I better get hot.
And he tries to bunt his way on and fouls it at the plate, and the count is 0-2.
Well, that surprised everybody.
Yeah.
That was the intent, no doubt, but not exactly a percentage type of play. Right here, trying to bunt himself on. He looked at the third baseman, but again, you have a runner in scoring position. I suppose what he said, I'm probably going to make an out, so maybe I can get on and let's leave it for Quinones.
Well, he saw Howard Johnson playing out by the Whitestone Bridge, and he figured he'd take a chance. Oh, 2 to Jackson is low. 1-2 the count.
Might be semi-okay for a pitcher to do that, but never for a regular. Never. Not with a guy in scoring position, 2 down. Shows he's been on the DL. He's been out of the offensive flow.
And very much out of the flow there on a breaking pitch. But in the inning, on 1 hit, the Reds scored twice. After 1.5, 2-0 Cincinnati. And in today's stage of the Tour de France, Greg LeMond was the winner, and he's the overall leader right now as he tries to capture it again. American Greg LeMond. Tour de France coverage again this weekend here on ABC. 2-0 Cincinnati with Danny Jackson going to work on the middle of the Mets order. It'll be Kevin McReynolds, Tim Tuffle, and Greg Jeffries in the bottom of the second inning. With Strawberry on the bench tonight, McReynolds hitting in the number 4 spot. Magadan, of course, is out. And Howard Johnson, who hits all over the lineup and has all season, is in the 3 spot. Meanwhile, that brief shower was exactly that. It is not raining at the moment, and those who scurried for cover have made their way back to the seats. Big crowd at Shea. Looks like it's sold out. 1-2. It's been home sweet home for the Mets, and as we mentioned at the outset, 31 of their next 45, about 2/3 of their next 45 games right here. Got him. First strikeout for Danny Jackson. And Tim Tuffle coming up.
I'll tell you, I don't think too many pitchers in either league get as low in their finish as Danny Jackson does.
Of course, that's the key to be able to sustain good velocity and whatever. But you talked about that toe injury. I think probably what happened, he had struggled with the toe, and then he favored it, hurt his shoulder, and then probably dropped his arm and ends up having nerve problems in his wrist.
Tim Tuffle takes a strike, and the count 0-1.
Back to Dizzy Dean.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the all-time great pitchers. Hurt his toe in an all-star game and never was the same. Fidrich, Lombard.
Tuffle drives one to left field, but backing up his Youngblood to make the catch. And there are 2 down.
Another thing we need to look for tonight is how long is Danny Jackson just coming off the disabled is going to go. And he said, I'd like to think right around 80 pitches. So it obviously behooves him not to throw a lot of pitches. It doesn't look like he has command of his pitches. Even the strikeout to McReynolds, all those balls out in the strike zone.
I'll tell you, when I see a guy as low as Jackson, I think of a guy who pitched here a long time, Tom Seaver, who got that low.
And Kuzman, all the guys, Ryan, they all use their lower body. And what that allows you to do is drive, take a lot of the pressure off your shoulder, and hence pitch a lot of innings. They all did that.
And when you see somebody sweating like Jackson is in the second inning, you don't have to call the Weather Bureau to find out what the humidity is here tonight. He is lathered up, and the 1-1 pitch is fouled back.
Another thing, too, Jim, when you finish like Jackson is finishing that low, it's impossible to have a good curveball. You have to throw a slider because the essence of a good curveball is getting on top of it, as you did, and ending in that position, there's no way for him to get on top of a pitch.
A lot easier to have a good curveball if you're like Dwight Gooden and have a more upright type of windup.
And you had that straight up and down delivery.
That's why Jackson throws the sinker and runs the hard slider in on you. And last year when he won 23 games, and as we said, second in Cy Young voting behind Orel Hershiser, had a great changeup he could spot away.
Jeffries waves at it and doesn't get it, and Jackson ends the second inning with a second strikeout. To the third in New York. Cincinnati 2 and the Mets nothing. Sonny Harris, who is forever blowing bubbles.
Pete Rose saying, when is the bubble going to burst?
Yeah, but that's the difference. That's a double bubble.
A double bubble.
Yeah.
Here are the American League All-Stars. Starters announced yesterday: McGuire and Franco, Boggs and Ripken, the infield. Bo Jackson, top quote getter in the American League, Puckett, and Jose Canseco. And we're told now that Canseco, even though he might be physically able to play, will not play in the All-Star game. He'll sign back the catcher. Mattingly and Sachs, Gaetti and Kelly Gruber, Tony Fernandez, Baines and Greenwell, and the rest of the reserves you saw there as we start the third inning with Quinones taking a strike.
Last statement from Steve Sachs. He said, I'll tell you what, do you mind being beat out by Julio Franco? He said, no, if I had a vote, I would have voted for him too.
In the air to deep left field, going all the way back is McReynolds. It's gone. And so Quinones gets his 5th run batted in of the season and his 4th home run.
All 4 homers have been solo shots. So low, but high enough to get over the fence, right? I mean, he tattooed that baby.
Luis Quinones.
Signed originally with Oakland, went to San Francisco, played for the Chicago Cubs, and found a home here with Cincinnati.
Benzinger swings and misses. The funny thing about Quinones, in 162 games prior to this season, he had hit 1 home run. That with the Reds last year, and now he's got 4 in 89.
You know, the thing about a leadoff hitter without a lot of power, if you're a pitcher, you don't want to walk him, so you probably give him a little bit better pitch considering who's second, third, and fourth in the lineup. Not to take anything away from Luis, because obviously he smoked that ball, but I tell you, West took a little bit off. He jumped on it, 3-0.
And he is a nemesis for West, is Quinones, because West had allowed only 1 run in his prior appearances with the Mets in 89. That run driven in by Quinones, and that's the first home run that David West has allowed in his major league career. Brief as it is. Benzinger hits it in the air down the right field line. Carry on with a long run, and it's a foul ball, just foul. First base umpire Lane racing down the line to make the call. 1-2. I think the Mets, Tim, have had their share or their fill of Quinoneses this season. Ray Quinones of Pittsburgh won a game as you look at the ball dropping foul by less than a foot. Ray Quinones with a home run off, I believe, Randy Myers.
Well, I tell you, that may have hit the line, the outside part of the line. You saw the dark spot show up in the line, and that's the way you can tell. I tell you, this is very, very close, and it could have hit the outside part of the line. Wow, wow, wow.
But no argument from the Reds. And Benzinger back up with a count 2-2.
Of course, Pete can't see that. The logical argument would be from Lee May, the first base coach. Yep. But Lee May, I don't think I ever saw Lee May get into an argument in his career.
And I tell you, Pete has a great angle on that as he rests on the top step of the Reds dugout. Benzinger pops his foul back at first, and not enough room for Tim Tuffle. But Rose is almost directly in line. There sits Pete, and he's looking right down the line. So he had a clear view of that one. There is Lee May. Classy man.
Oh, I'll say. Tony Perez, the batting instructor. Here's the look again. I'll tell you, if they call that ball fair, they being Jerry Lane, the first base umpire, I don't think the Mets can complain about it.
McEnroe would have gone crazy. Still 2-2. 3-0 Cincinnati.
How about Lee May's bat? Over 300 home runs as you look at Tony Perez.
379 home runs for Tony.
Lee had something like over 350. In fact, I pitched against him in the 70 World Series. I throw him a fastball. He rips it to left for a single. I said, I better adjust. I throw him a curveball. He hits it in the upper deck for a 2-run home run. So the third time up, what do you throw him? A changeup, right? And if you ever look at the 70 highlight film, the third pitch I threw him the changeup is the highlight where Brooks Robinson catches it behind the coach's box and throws it on one hop to Boog Powell, and they just get Lee May.
Yeah, and that was the early days of the Big Red Machine. But the thing that soldered that team together was the trade of Lee May that brought Joe Morgan there when Lee went to Houston.
He was the key man.
Yeah.
He and Tommy Helms and Jimmy Stewart, who was a utility player. Speaking of Tommy Helms, he's one of the Reds coaches right now as Benziger hits it foul. And the thing that people forget about in regard to that trade is not only did the Reds get Morgan, but they also got Jack Billingham, and they got Dennis Menke and Cesar Geronimo and an Armbruster as well. Called strike 3, so Benziger is gone. That's the second strikeout for David West. And as we look at it again, Larkin comes to the plate.
Oh, this is such a great angle. You can see Lombardi move in. Look where the ball is. We told you about the great stuff that West has. So far, he's not made pitches like this. He does right there. Great pitch, an inside corner for a strikeout. I think he'll find you just can't pitch in the middle of the plate in the big leagues, especially if you don't get your breaking ball over.
Now Larkin battling Tony Gwynn for the batting title. Hitting .350. He's hitting .390 against left-handers. Change inside. 2 balls and no strikes.
Here's a guy, Larkin, that's 244, then 296. Now he's up around 350. Where is it going to stop? Lee May, the batting instructor, said just knowing the league, maturing, not trying to hit home runs, even though he's still capable of doing that.
Well, I'll tell you, if he leads the league in hitting, all you have to do is look at the last 20 years in both leagues and see how unusual it is for a right-handed hitter to lead either league in hitting.
As a matter of fact, as that one is fouled back out of play, a little quiz, and we'll give you a little more time to think about this than Benziger and Parker. But only one right-handed hitter has won a batting title in the National League in the last. How many years is it, Tim?
Since 1971, when Joe Torre hit .363. And, of course, that's a trick question because Bill Madlock did it four times. But in the American League, only one right-hander since 1970, and that was Carney Lansford in 1981. So the left-handers hit for the average more than the right-handers. I think that can be deduced.
And that'll raise his average a couple of points with a solid base hit. He takes a wide turn, does Larkin, and retreats to first base as the throw comes in. So Larkin going to the All-Star game. Aboard at first with 1 out. And to finish the American League All-Stars, taking a look at the reserves. And, of course, you had Jeffrey Leonard making the team. And it's a good thing they put Ruben Sierra on the team as well. He was way down in the fan balloting for whatever reason. And Mickey Tettleton, Chuck Finley from the Angels, and Mark Gubazar is going to go. Henneman from the Tigers, and Doug Jones, Moore and Plesac, Russell, Nolan Ryan, of course, Dave Stewart, Greg Swindell, pitching staff. Davis pops it up in foul territory, and Lombardi won't have a play back on the screen. Funny the way Nolan Ryan makes the All-Star team. It's been 10 years since he's pitched in Anaheim, and he's due to pitch tonight against his one-time mates, and then he'll remain there and maybe get a chance to pitch again on Tuesday.
Perfect scenario, isn't it? Nolan at twilight.
In that ballpark.
If you're a fan, like to see strikeouts.
Davis takes a strike, and the count quickly 0-2.
Talking about Ruben Sierra, who is batting even higher than Barry Larkin right now, it would seem that Sierra would be the logical replacement for Canseco in right field.
Down goes Davis. So Eric strikes out on 3 pitches, and Rooms is the batter. The interesting thing is that normally what they'll do is they'll take the next highest vote getter and make him the starter, but a couple of interesting choices there. To replace Canseco, they'll have to come up with somebody. And also in the National League, with Mike Schmidt having retired, if he went to the second leading vote getter, that's Chris Sabo, and he's on the disabled list, so he couldn't play. So it could very well be that, well, the choice will boil down to Howard Johnson, who was number 4, and there is Sabo, or Bobby Bonilla, who was number 3. So as usual, a lot of controversy surrounding the All-Star selections as it's fouled away. You've got one retired guy, one guy who hasn't played an inning, Canseco. But as far as I know, everybody is still alive who was voted to the All-Star team. They're all still of the president. I mean, that would be the ultimate, wouldn't it? 1 year.
And Dwight Gooden, $25,000 if he had been named. Not quite as severe as when Clemens 2 years ago after 86 would have got, I think, $150,000. John McNamara said, hey, I don't want anything of this. And I think really let Bobby Brown, the president of the American League, decide.
Well, it's an interesting case with the Mets. I mean, if Gooden has that in his contract, I mean, doesn't he go in and say, hey, wait a second, they would have named me. Shouldn't I get the money? In the air to deep right center field. Samuel goes all the way back with carry on, and that one carries out of here. A home run for Rolando Ruiz. And all the Reds have to hope for right now is for the Storm to hold off, because there's lightning and thunder all around. We've had some sprinkles, and Cincinnati has a 5-0 lead in the 3rd inning. Rolando Ruiz hits his 4th home run of the season to drive in 2, and it's 5-0 Reds. Joel Youngblood fouls it back, 0-1.
Well, Davy Johnson, as you look at Orlando Ruiz, last year in the Cub organization, it's 16 home runs at AAA. Never much of a chance to play here in the major leagues. I mean, he smoked that ball. They stopped running. Rolando Ruiz, excuse me. Did I say Orlando?
Confusing him with Cepeda after that shot.
To right center.
Tee shot, yes.
The same thing.
Like I said, he hit it like Orlando Cepeda. No.
That's hit softly and through into center field for a base hit off the end of the bat. Youngblood with a single to center field, 4th hit in the inning, and Brown is the batter, and the Mets bullpen will get busy.
Again, Davy Johnson saying the last 2 starts, not including this one, the ugliest 2 starts he's seen in a long time from 2 Mets starters. Ojeda got roughed up on Tuesday. Last night, Ron Darling did not pitch very well, and then tonight, the inexperience of David West in his 2nd major league start really showing. Behind in the count, hasn't walked a lot of guys, but really not getting the ball in good locations.
Jeff Innes throwing in the Mets bullpen. This is the last thing the Mets wanted after the past couple of days, because Bob Ojeda was knocked out in the 1st inning on the 4th of July, and Ron Darling came out in the 5th yesterday. And now the Mets may have to go into the bullpen early again. 1-1 to count.
Well, you know West is nervous. His 1st start of the year, only his 2nd major league start, but look who he's replacing in the rotation. Doc Gooden. That's got to weigh on your mind. Obviously not making any excuses for him, but you add all of those things up, and the mind plays some tricks on you.
1-2.
Plus, how about the mental preparation of starting? You know, as a reliever, you sit out there, they just, hey, get West up, you go into the ball game. I don't know if he was on the flight last night, Timmy, when you came back.
No, he flew early.
Okay, so he's got to come home
right.
early. He knows he's going to get a good night rest. And then, if he doesn't pitch well, everybody looks at him, hey, no excuses. A little bit more difficult. I don't care how long you've been around. I hated to go back the night early and get my rest, because then I didn't have an excuse. Mets getting back, what, at about 6 o'clock this morning from Houston?
You just wanted the frequent flyer mileage on any of that. 2-2 is foul tipped, and Lombardi can't hold it. So Brown is still alive, and the count remains 2 balls and 2 strikes. 2 out. Youngblood at first. Dave Bristol flashing signs. 5-0 Cincinnati. Bristol among those with rumors swirling in regard to Rose and when and if the shoe would drop. Whom would the Reds name to succeed Rose? And the most prominent of the names have been Bristol and Chuck Tanner. Line drive caught by Elster. But in the inning, a couple of home runs by Quinones and Rooms, and the Reds lead 5-0.
Joanne Baldowski.
Hey, this is Corey McFerrin. Tigers had just taken a 5-4 lead, top of 11, but Jesse Barfield gets it back. Towering shot off Mike Henneman here, and it's suddenly 5-all. Then after a Mike Polirilo double, Steve Sachs ends the game with this sacrifice fly to right, brings Polirilo in from third. 6-5 Yankees, their third straight win over Detroit. Back to Al at Shea.
All right, Corey, and here at Shea Stadium, in the bottom of the third inning, Cincinnati 5, and the Mets rooting for rain, nothing. Rose and Perez with Dave Bristol. Reds trying to get healthy prior to the All-Star break. Been a tough stretch for Cincinnati, losing 16 of the last 24. So Lombardi takes a strike. Lombardi, the 37th player to play with both New York teams. And if this were a football team, he'd have been number 4 on your depth chart when the season began. But because of the injuries to Carter and now Barry Lyons, they're down to Lombardi and Mackey Sasser. No balls, 2 strikes to count. And Danny Jackson has strikeout number 3. So Jackson has faced the minimum 7 to this point. He walked carry on in the first inning, but he was erased on Johnson's double play. And here's Kevin Elster. Been a struggle for Elster. And I guess all things considered, a real struggle for the Mets offensively almost from day one this year.
Well, that's exactly what Elster has been doing since the first 2 weeks of the season. He's very indecisive. And you'll notice him when he goes forward with his stride, the bat comes forward. And when a hitter does that, he spins his power. It's all right to come forward with the body. Obviously, you've got to do that. But the bat's got to stay back. Now watch the bat come forward with the body. As the stride comes forward, the bat comes forward. And if you do that, the only thing with which that's left to hit are your arms. You have no body strength whatsoever.
1-2.
Yeah, so all the great hitters, the Olivas, the Kalines, the Carews. But you know what? There's a guy for the Orioles, Jim Traber. He had the same problem. You know what he did? He moved his hands even with his body. So therefore, what he has to do when he starts to swing is move them back. So in other words, the body may be going forward, the hands are going back, and he gets him the proper hitting thing.
Yeah, good hitters are inverted. That's right. The hands go back as the body goes forward.
And if you watch Kevin, he's the opposite. Everything's forward. But you can also, I think, from the facial expressions, that he is real disappointed. And he's frustrated. He gets a good pitch to hit. You can see by the facial expression that, hey, I know that was my chance. That was the only chance, and now they're going to make a good pitch. Hence the 200 batting average.
And you know, it's really a strange case because, Kevin, look at it again. As you see the body go forward, the hands come with it, as opposed to the hands going back when the body goes forward. But it's very strange because Kevin had a very intelligent spring training. He hit the ball the other way. He started the season hitting the ball the other way. But seriously, it disappeared, and he's back to trying to pull everything.
2-2. It has to be a complete mystery to Elster. In his last minor league season in '87, he hit .310. And then last year, on an everyday basis, .214. So he was down nearly 100 points. And at the moment, .207. And probably closer to .206 after Benzinger corrals this one for the out. So 2 down here in the 3rd inning. Elster is gone, and West comes to the plate. Despite being down 5-0, as we said before, the Mets have had to go to their bullpen early in the last 2 games. And with the score 5-0, and 2 out of the bases empty, well, you might as well let your pitcher hit. Oh, 0-1. Look at that over the last 3 games. Much of that 8-run Houston first inning. Tuesday. 19 runs in 8 in the 3rd innings. And that's what happened in a good pitcher's park, the Dome, oddly enough. And oddly enough, the Mets' first hit is off the bat of a pitcher. David West with a single to left field.
West is a good hitter. In a game about 10 days ago, before the Mets went on the recent road trip where they were 3-6, Ron Darling hit his first major league home run, and David West in that same game just missed his first major league home run. So the Mets almost had 2 pitchers to hit their first major league home run in the same game. Good hitter.
Well, last year, he hit 1,000. He was up briefly. He was 2 for 2, so that's not his first major league hit. It's his 3rd. First of the year. Not too bad, though. He's a lifetime 500 hitter at the moment. Time to retire. Samuel hits it slowly down to Quinones, who can't barehand it. And the Mets have their first threat on a single by West and a squibber by Samuel. With runners at first and second, Mark Carrion comes to the plate.
Not hit very hard, but one of the reasons they got Juan Samuel is because he runs everything out. I don't think Quinones does not know that. Even the squibbers. Hasn't been really producing that well, Timmy, but I tell you what, he does come to play.
He really does. And it's a shame that shows up, because there are a lot of guys, and we talk about money, there are a lot of guys making more money than Samuel who don't run everything out. And that's not giving the fans their money's worth. That's a shame.
1-0 on Carrion.
You know, what's a real shame is the fact that exactly what you said, Jim, that Samuel runs balls out. I mean, if you're making the type of money that guys are making today, why shouldn't you give an effort 4 times a game? Is that too much to ask?
Well, what's really amazing is that Pete Rose was such an aberration. I mean, you would think that everybody would play the game like Pete Rose, or at least attempt to. And yet there he was, a real oddity. Not only in what he accomplished statistically and the rest, but in the way he played the game. And the one thing about Rose, I mean, Rose would play the same way in the 8th inning of an exhibition game in Bradenton as he would in the 7th game of the World Series.
And yet the
he
guys
only knew one way.
The guys that don't hustle said he was a hot dog.
Yeah. Running out walks.
Two and two.
Kind of a contrasted terms anyway, running walks now.
I don't think a fan ever begrudges a guy that hustles.
No. Neither do opposing players or teammates.
The 2-2 to Mark Carrion. Just inside, so 3-2 the count, and Rose will watch as West takes off from second, and Samuel from first. And it's fouled away. So the Mets with a chance to climb back into it. Cincinnati on top 5-0. Bottom of the 3rd. 2 out and 2 on against Danny Jackson. And 3-2 on Carrion.
Carrion, the type of quick bat that can get you back in the game. a ball over his head last night, and I mean, that was one of the strangest swings I've ever seen, but still managed to yank it in the left field corner. He will get the bat head out if you get the ball in the middle of the plate.
Runners go, and the pitch is inside, and they're loaded up for Howard Johnson. Howard Johnson with 22 home runs, second to Kevin Mitchell, who has 28. Before this season, Jackson had never allowed a grand slam home run, and strangely, he's allowed 2 this year. One to Matt Williams, who went back to the minors, and the other by Chris James when he was in Philadelphia before he went to San Diego. And Johnson pops it in the air, playable for Benzinger. Down the line and fair ground, and makes the catch. So Johnson swings at the first pitch, and the Mets lead 3. End of 3, 5-0 Cincinnati.
ABC's Thursday Night Baseball, brought to you by the heartbeat of America, today's Chevrolet.
Shea Stadium in New York. Al Michaels with Jim Palmer and Tim McCarver. Thursday Night Baseball. The Reds leading the Mets 5-0 as we go to the 4th inning. Nothing new in the Pete Rose situation today. Yesterday, many of you know, the case kind of put on hold for 2 weeks while a federal judge in Columbus, Ohio, decides jurisdiction of the Reds manager's lawsuit against Commissioner Bart Giamatti, which had been taken from a court in Cincinnati and the courtroom of Judge Norbert Nadel, and moved to Columbus, to federal court. And so nothing will happen until the 17th of July or further. So very much put on hold. But there is a man who obviously is completely consumed by what is taking place around him. And yet he was very careful to point out in the clubhouse before the game, hey, don't go saying that I'm real down about this. I'm surviving. What better shot? What better time to put him on camera?
On cue,
to show the mood
yeah.
of Pete. Seated next to Tony Perez. 1-1. I don't know what's going to happen. People have said, well, why don't they think about a compromise? It's just my personal opinion. I have never known Pete Rose to compromise anything. He has said he is innocent. He has said it will be proven in the long run. I assume he truly believes it. And if that is the case, he's not thinking about a compromise.
And Bart Giamatti has not been commissioner long enough to know whether he believes in compromises or not.
That's right.
I'll tell you one thing, though. You know, I think what's been lost in the shuffle to a degree is the seriousness of the charge and the severity of the penalty with which baseball players in the big leagues have the utmost respect.
And that's about gambling.
That is exactly right.
Well,
I remember meetings that were held back in the early 60s, and of course I was in my early 20s at a very impressionable age. There were 4 places in the National League that were off limits because of suspected gambling participants in these places. And I mean, we scrupulously regarded that rule about not even getting into the occasion of where gamblers might be.
Oh, anybody asks you about how your arm feels, you say, hey, this guy might be betting on baseball.
That's right.
You shy away from those people.
We were that sensitive.
Well, what it amounts to now, and it's very difficult to have a real logical discussion with Pete about this, because he contends that he is innocent. And so we're all assuming, because the evidence seems to be so substantial and significant, that everybody is assuming he is guilty. But he doesn't look at it that way. So when you begin to discuss it with him, he doesn't want to hear about, hey, what if they find this out, Pete? He doesn't want to hear that, because he's saying, hey, look, my day will come, and I will prove that that's not true. Little chopper through the middle, and that's a base hit for Danny Jackson with 1 out here in the 4th inning. So he is on, and Quinones is the batter, and that's what's posted in every locker room in larger type than that. That's out of the book. But that's a sign that Rose has passed thousands of times.
That initiated and spawned back in 1926 by Kennesaw Mountain Landis. Ironically, after the guy, or certainly an involvement of the guy that Pete Rose was chasing all those years, Ty Cobb and Tris Speaker. A case involving the two dating back to 1919, and the decision was actually no decision as to their guilt by Landis.
Cobb and the then Commissioner Landis and Hall of Famer Tris Speaker. In the air to left field and deep, McReynolds does a 360, and that one is gone. And Quinones, who had one lifetime home run coming into the 1989 season, has hit 2 tonight and has 5 for the year. And it's 7-0. And that'll bring another smile to the face of Pete Rose.
Almost an instant replay of the first home run. Belled high right down the middle. Still got to hit it. He does. Say, Kevin McReynolds got that home run trot back to the fence, talking about the Mets left fielder. He just runs back, looks up. Can't believe that Quinones is hitting him that far.
Benzinger at the fly ball to right center field, and Carry-On slides out of Sam Wells' way. The two on a collision course, and Mark hitting the grass as Sam Well makes the catch. Juan saying thank you very much.
The shortstop, Barry Lockett.
2 down.
Sam Wells' first year as a center fielder last night. Almost made a nice catch on a ball that most center fielders would catch in Houston, Tim. And it seems he can throw, he can run, but is inexperienced out there.
Larkin takes inside, ball 1. 1-0. 7-0 Cincinnati in the 4th inning. 2 out, bases empty. The count.
To kind of talk further about the Rose-Giamatti situation, or the alleged gambling, I mean, a lot of people are saying you're innocent until proven guilty. That's true in Pete's case, but it's also true in Bart Giamatti's case as far as the prejudgment's concerned. But I don't think the perception with the public is really that way. I think the perception is more toward Rose now, and I think it's a bit unfair to Giamatti.
I agree, and we'll talk about that when we come back as Lombardi falls in the foul, pop by Larkin. End of 3.5, 7-0.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please. We have a black actor.
The only thing that could ruin the Reds night would be a little bit of rain, because it's still not an official game as we head to the bottom of the 4th inning. But Danny Jackson coming off the disabled list, and he is the beneficiary of a 7-run Cincinnati cushion.
David West will certainly remember his first start in 1989.
Not very fondly.
Well, you do learn from your mistakes, or preponderance of them tonight for David West.
Here's McReynolds to lead off. Tuffle and Jeffries to follow against Danny Jackson. Just to pick up on that point, Tim, that we had gotten into in regard to Giamatti, I think people lose track of what really took place here early on. And I'm not saying anything in regard to whether or not Giamatti in a legal sense prejudged this, but I mean, if you go back to square one, do you in your right mind, does anybody in their right mind think that Bart Giamatti, when this investigation started, wanted to find, let's say, the goods on Pete Rose? I mean, what are we talking about here?
Plopped in his lap by Peter Uberoff.
In his heart of hearts, he had to be hoping that all of it was untrue, that nothing would come of it. So when people say, oh, he's always had it in for Pete Rose, they have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are comparing it to last year's 30-day suspension when he ran into Dave Pallone.
Exactly.
Actually pushed him.
Exactly.
Well, you're talking apples and oranges in that. particular instance.
Larkin throws at McReynolds, but I mean, can anybody in their right mind think the commissioner of baseball would want to suspend Pete Rose? It's crazy. But I mean, he does. I mean, his function is to protect the integrity of the game. And if he does have the goods, so to speak, then that is what he has to do.
The only mistake he's made is that signing that one letter that John Dowd. And if you take that away, I don't see any projection of prejudging other than that. Of course, that's the legal stance that Pete Rose's lawyers have taken. They're going to fight that till to the nth degree.
Tim Tuffle takes a strike and the count 0-1. And what about the effect on the game? That's another misconception. People say, oh, it'll hurt the game, it'll destroy it. No, come on. We've heard that for so many years now. This and that will kill the game. Nothing has been able to even severely damage the game. You go all the way back to, let's say, 1972, the first players' strike. Everybody said, oh, I'm not going to go to the ballpark again. Yeah, that lasted about 3 days. And then the big strike in '81, same thing. And the drug scandals and all of that. Baseball has been incredibly resilient.
I think to a man, the Cincinnati Reds would like to have this over. Tonight, they were all moaning about 2 more weeks. You know, either you're innocent or you're guilty. Let's find out.
1-2 the count. And Tuffle goes down swinging. So Danny Jackson has struck out 4. And Jeffries is the batter. To me, it's remarkable that Rose has been able to stay as focused on the game, because here's a guy who not only has problems in regard to the continuation of his career, but the reports of the IRS also being involved, and to have that weighing on your mind as well, and think of the legal fees that he is incurring right now. I mean, these guys don't work for free, as we all know.
You know what the mentality of all great players is, though? You take one day at a time, and I believe that's the only way that he's been able to get through this. You go 0 for 4, hey, let's go get him tomorrow. And it seems like whatever happens, he can come to the ballpark and just go through whatever he has to do. Did it as a player.
Oh, you're dealing with a different guy when you talk about Pete handling things. It's almost like he's Superman when it comes to handling things. Right in the face of adversity, he carries on as if nothing happened.
You're exactly right. And that's why, as I say, it's very difficult to sometimes get into a very logical discussion of what's happening.
I mean, here's a man that said they have 225 pages and not even one good page about what type of guy I am, yet he'll look in the camera and say, I didn't bet on baseball.
Well, that's what he said. And you got to think he believes it, because he keeps saying it. To center field, Davis going all the way back, gets there, and with his great speed, hauls it down on the warning track. So a long out off the bat of Jeffries. Jackson off the disabled list has pitched 4 shutout innings with a little help from his friends. And at the end of 4, it's 7-0 Reds. Back we come after this message and news headlines from our ABC station. Cincinnati with 7 runs, 7 hits, and the Mets no runs, 2 hits going to the 5th inning. 2 homers for Quinones and 1 for Rolando Rooms, and that's that for David West as Jeff Innes comes out of the bullpen. So again, it's a short outing for a Mets starting pitcher. And here comes Innes out of the bullpen. And to update that line we showed you earlier, in their last 3 games, the Mets starters have given up 21 runs in 9 in the 3rd innings. And you're talking about Ojeda, Darling, and tonight West.
Well, they've all said we're going to miss Gooden. We're going to have to tough it out, pitch a little bit better, and then they haven't. Because it's a long season.
First man he faces is Davis, who has walked and struck out. Just to kind of button up for the moment the Rose thing, to make that point we were talking about in the commercial about Pete.
I think for those who are looking for compassion out of Pete, not necessarily from him to you as the audience or us, but he doesn't want compassion either. I mean, he doesn't want anybody to feel sorry for him, and that's an understatement. He is of the mind that I will handle this all on my own. I got myself into it, or I didn't, and I have to stand up and do my own work. He has never, and he's been that way forever. That's Pete's way.
Yep. No, I think that's very, very perceptive, because I've watched a couple of people come up to him, and it's almost as if you're approaching somebody who's had something tragic happen to them, and they give you that sort of baleful look, and Rose will have none of it. He doesn't want to hear about that or act that way. He just changes the subject, and on he goes. Grounded down to Tuffle. He shovels in his covering just in time as Jeff gets there in front of Davis on the bang-bang play. One out. Let's get an update from Corey McCarron.
Yeah, all Three Rivers tonight. 1-0 Pirates in the 8th. John Smiley delivering to Robbie Thompson, and he booms one to left field here. This will tie it up, a home run. So it's 1-1 in the bottom of the 8th inning. Rick Russell, by the way, pulled for a pinch hitter, will not win his 13th tonight. Al?
All right, Corey. One out. And Rolando Rooms, who homered his last trip. I don't know, they can go back and take a look at the bang-bang play on Davis in a moment at first base.
Well, Davis can run. Ennis does his job, but I think the inexperience of Tim Tuffle underhanding the ball instead of throwing it overhand takes a little bit longer to get there. It makes the play a lot closer than it should have been. So we haven't mentioned Dave Magadan, I don't believe. I mean, hurt his back last night, may go on the disabled list. And here's a guy that has been one of the great offensive players since Keith Hernandez has been hurt. Hitting some home runs, hitting over 300, and he's really indefinite.
2-1. You know, it's funny the way things work out, because the way Magadan has been hitting and playing, people started talking about, hey, what happens when Hernandez comes back? And don't these things have a funny way of working out? And there is Dave Magadan, whose immediate future, because of that back problem, is questionable, as Hernandez now appears to be about a week away from being activated. In the air to shallow center field, Samuel comes charging in to make the catch. And there are two down with Youngblood coming to the plate. That's why managers are always very evasive when a guy is at least a couple of weeks away from coming back, and people are always coming in and saying, well, what are you going to do?
I think I have a pretty good idea. Magadan goes to third, and Howard Johnson goes to shortstop, and Keith Hernandez, after winning, 11 straight Gold Gloves, goes back to first base.
Especially the way the Mets have had problems scoring runs. By the way, Keith Hernandez will go to Port St. Lucie and play for Clint Hurdle, former major leaguer, and a guy that I personally believe is going to be a major league manager someday.
So maybe he fizzled out as the projected phenom, but he'll make it as a manager.
Yeah, you remember the SI cover in 1977?
Yep.
Featuring Clint, and he could do everything, enormous talent. Turned into a journeyman major leaguer, and that might have been the best thing to happen to him as far as his future major league managing job, if he indeed has one.
Learned all skills, became a catcher so he could be the third catcher in the National League. Got him a job here in New York. They're coming up as an outfielder for Kansas City for the Royals.
One and two the count.
But the one thing that does solve a lot of problems for managers nowadays is that rehab program where a major leaguer can go down to the minor leagues, test out his thing without being penalized as far as your roster is concerned. And that's what Keith's going to do over the next 4 or 5 days.
And that, of course, is what Jose Canseco has been doing, playing at Huntsville in the Southern League. Youngblood waves at it and doesn't get it, and Ennis has a 1-2-3 inning. To the bottom of the fifth we go. Cincinnati 7, New York nothing. For the Mets fans tonight, he is ever hopeful as we go to the bottom of the fifth inning. And it doesn't appear as if rain will save the Mets as well. We had a brief shower earlier in the second inning, and we've had thunder and lightning around the ballpark, but it appears pretty placid at the moment.
The weather's about as stagnant as the Mets offense has been recently.
Just 2 hits through 4. As Lombardi starts the 5th inning by taking a strike. Talk about stagnation. One and one. Lombardi, Elster, and the pitcher's spot in the bottom of the 5th inning. One and two. The Reds, to make room for Danny Jackson on their roster, have sent Jack Armstrong, no relation to the All-America boy, back to the minors. So I guess they send the All-America boy back to the American Association. There was some speculation they were going to put Jose Rijo on the disabled list. That's not the case. 2 and 2.
Phil Lombardi, as a matter of fact, formerly with the Yankees, as you said, the 37th player to play with the Mets and Yankees, played with Jose Rijo back in 1983 at Fort Lauderdale. Also, Tim Burks is a member of the Reds.
Check swing, pop up to Benzinger for the out. 1 away. Kevin Elster will be coming to the plate. European Women's Gymnastics Championships and the Tour de France highlight ABC's Wide World of Sports. And you'll see it this Saturday, this weekend, at 4:30 Eastern and Pacific, 3:30 Central, here on ABC. Kevin Elster fouled out in the 3rd inning. Larkin. One shortstop retires the other. And the Mets still have only 2 hits, and they were successive hits. West and Samuel with 2 out in the 3rd inning. Innis will hit for himself with 2 out and the bases empty. At Wrigley this afternoon, the Cubs win it back of Maddox 7-3. The Giants, on a home run by Thompson, have caught Pittsburgh 1-1 in the 9th. Cardinals leading the Dodgers. Dodgers absolutely dead offensively, 5-0 in the 5th inning. And Philadelphia leading Atlanta 4-0 in the 6th. Innis fouls it back. The Cardinals, were they to win and they lead 5-0, and the Mets, were they to lose and they trail 7-0, would move into 3rd place, and New York would be 4th. Little broken bat pop-up, and Jackson takes care of his opposite number. And Danny, rolling along, has set down 7 in a row. Into 5, it remains Reds 7. Mets nothing. Shea Stadium packed but very quiet because the visitors lead 7-0. Cincinnati comes to bat at the top of the 6th inning. Bottom of the order, Marty Brown, Jeff Reed, and Danny Jackson. Marty Brown with a double in the 2nd inning to get the Reds off and running. They scored twice in the 2nd, 3 times in the 3rd, twice in the 4th. Jeff Innis, in relief of David West, starts him with a breaking ball for a strike. 0-1 on Brown.
Not much hope for him ever to be with the ball club as long as Terry Leach was on this club, a fellow submariner.
Chopper, and Innis fields and throws Brown out, 1 away. Leach subsequently sent to Kansas City after beginning the year with the team, and Innis coming up from the minors. In the American League, the Yankees win it in the Bronx this afternoon, 6-5. Toronto leads the Orioles 4-1 in the 7th. Oakland now in 2nd place, leading Kansas City 2-0 in the 6th. Boston 4-2 over Milwaukee in the 6th. Texas and the 1st place Angels meeting later. Minnesota, Seattle underway later. Reed hits one down the left field line, and that's in for extra bases. Squirting into the corner. McReynolds plays it at the wall and gets it back in as Reed pulls in at 2nd with a double. And for the Reds tonight, that's 8 hits and 5 of them for extra bases.
The pitcher, Danny Jackson.
You mentioned Terry Leach with Kansas City. We'll have Kansas City next Thursday night. A chance to see Bo Jackson at Yankee Stadium.
Johnson, despite the grin, going to the roll age. Bo with 20 homers, 20 steals as Jackson hits one down the right field line, and that is a fair ball knocked down by Carry-On. Reed got a late start, but rounds third and comes in to score, and Danny Jackson is 2 for 3. And we told you he was hot. Remember the graphic early on? 0 for his first 14, and then 6 for his next 14, and you can make it 8 for his next 17.
Nice effort by Mark Carry-On. Amazing the ball did not get by him. Real bad on the elbow and the forearm, abrasion-wise. A ball you're not going to catch. We've seen most of the field being used. Left field line, now right field line. Yeah, that's quite an effort when you consider the score was 7-0, now 8-0. Usually just go over there, we'll play it on a double.
Yeah, that's why outfielders drop to their knees to bring the ball to glove level instead of bending from the waist.
Well, it's also the kind of effort, Jim, you're going to see from somebody trying to win a regular job.
Got that right.
Quinones, meanwhile, who's homered his last 2 trips to the plate, takes a strike. The difference now is that Quinones is hitting from the left side. He was hitting .258 right-handed, and he's batting .167 this way. 1-1. In the 4th inning. This the second of his 2 home runs, coming with a man on.
I think it's safe to venture that his natural swing is from the right side. That's a tremendous bat speed.
In the air to right field, relatively deep but playable as Carry-On makes the catch, and Jackson tags at second, and Danny goes to third. So Quinones gives it a little bit of a ride for the second out here in the 6th inning, and Benziger comes to the plate.
Thought that ball was gone. You know,
when it left the bat.
Yes. Of course, invariably, Al, when you talk to guys that become switch hitters, it's always they came up to the big leagues as right-handed hitters. Of course, there are exceptions like Greg Jeffries. And then they see the right-handed slider, and somebody suggests because they can run a little bit, why don't you get over on the left side?
Todd Benziger, a switch hitter, takes a strike in the count 0-1.
I think a point you made a couple of games ago, Tim, is when you are a switch hitter, unless you're facing a screwball pitcher, the breaking ball always is coming towards you instead of going away. It makes a lot of sense if you can do it.
You never have to bail out.
Yeah, and even if you do, the ball follows you.
Stroked into left field for a base hit. So Benziger joins the hit parade as Danny Jackson comes in to score. And it is 9-0 Cincinnati.
And I'll tell you, the way Benziger hit that ball, it's just the opposite of bailing out. You talk about diving into a sinker. You mentioned Jeff Ennis, a submarine pitcher. I used to kid Terry Leach all the time saying that if they judge a guy who throws overhand with radar, what do they judge you with? Sonar? He's a submariner, right? Terry had a great sense of humor. He said, only for the ping hitters.
Larkin with 2 outs takes a breaking pitch for a strike. Funny the way things work. Last week we see the Giants score 12 runs, and Clark and Mitchell go a collective 1 for 8, so everybody else was hot that night. Tonight the Reds have banged out 10 hits, and the only man in the lineup without a hit is Eric Davis. As Larkin hits a chopper back to Ennis, and he throws him out to retire the side. But the Reds get 2 more on 3 hits, and after 5.5, it's 9-0 Cincinnati. Lenny Harris takes over at shortstop. as Barry Larkin will get the rest of the night off. And why not with a 9-0 lead. Here's our lineup again next Thursday night. Kansas City and Bo Jackson coming to New York to face the Yankees. Some of you will see the Cardinals against the Dodgers. And those two teams are meeting tonight as well, with St. Louis leading 5-0 in the bottom of the 5th inning. Top of the order for the Mets in the bottom of the 6th inning. Juan Samuel, 1 for 2 tonight. Samuel, Carrion, and Johnson. With Samuel, well, you know what you're going to get. You move him into the leadoff spot, and you know he's going to strike out a lot. But Davey Johnson figures that's his best lineup. He led the league in strikeouts 4 consecutive seasons. 1-1.
The Mets hoping that Sammy will perform like he did 2 years ago instead of the way he performed last year. He drove in 100 runs 2 years ago.
Little looper, and Quinones can't make the play, so Samuel is aboard with 2 dunkers tonight. An infield single in the 3rd inning, and a little looper here in the 6th, but he's not going to throw anything back after coming in 8 for 46 as a Met.
Well, another example, you don't have to hit it well. Fights it off. Shows me he's not trying to swing for a home run. Down 9 runs. And that's the way to hit Danny Jackson. They've been swinging a lot of balls out of the strike zone tonight and helping Danny out. But then again, you got good stuff, and Jackson does throw the ball hard. You better get it ready.
Carrion takes a 5-1. Now, why would Benzinger be holding Samuel on at first base?
Got me.
He scored 9-0.
Got me. Well, he said he learned more in the first week of spring training with Tony Perez and Lee May than he ever did in Boston. They must have dozed off.
He might have missed class.
Yeah.
But really, the first baseman's told by someone on the bench.
I think Bill Robinson, the Mets coach, is saying, what are you doing holding him on?
Really?
Two and 0 the count.
The reason for that, the deeper into a game you get with a big lead, the more you're concerned with getting 1 out. You're not concerned with a double play. You're not worried about stolen bases. You want 1 out, because 1 out gets you closer to a victory, especially with a 9-run lead.
That's fouled at the plate, and the count is 2-1.
I could see playing a half a step behind him, keeping him kind of close, but you don't want to let him walk into second base, because I suppose you take away the force play, but you are thinking in terms of doing that. It's kind of a strange play.
Well, you look mighty funny if Carrion squibs one through the position right now, and you end up 1st and 3rd, when actually you would have had an out.
With a left-handed pitcher and Benzinger behind him, you can still keep him relatively close.
Sure.
And that one gets by Reed and goes to the backstop. So Benzinger doesn't have to worry about Samuel now. With Juan at second base. Wild pitch. And activity in the bullpen for the Reds as Kent Tekulve gets up. You got to keep in mind as Jackson uncorks one here that Danny is just off the disabled list and hasn't pitched in almost 3 weeks.
And I would think he is well into that 80 pitch limit. Really struggled in the 3rd. With a 9-run lead, why take a chance with a guy you need for the second half?
Wrapped foul outside 3rd, 3-2. Rose checking out along with Scotty Breeden, the lineup card.
Yeah, I think the one guy they're looking at is Howard Johnson. Johnson with 2 home runs against Tekulve and 2 at-bats last weekend. And Hojo, the next hitter.
Still 3-2 on Carrion. Johnson will be next. And Jackson has taken care of Johnson twice tonight. Got him to hit into a double play in the 1st. And then Howard popped out with the bases loaded when the Mets tried to climb back into it in the 3rd. Jackson, a great year in '88. And this year, a real struggle. And Carrion pops it up into shallow right field. Room's coming on, and he waves Quinones off the play to make the catch for the out.
Talking about Danny Jackson, I would think that if Hershiser does not have that 59-inning scoreless streak last year, that he probably wins, as Scott Breeden, the pitching coach, comes out to the mound, probably wins the Cy Young Award.
Yep. He was the Cy Young Award winner until August 29th.
That's when the streak started?
Right. I think his 1987 season was of note. That's one of the reasons that the Reds obtained him from Kansas City for Kurt Stillwell. He was 9-18, and the Royals only finished 2 games behind in the Western Division that year to Minnesota. And no pitcher has ever lost that many games and have had his team finish that few games behind as the Royals did that year. He lost 18, and they finished 2 back.
And that made him a lot more expendable. And so they packaged them and sent him to Cincinnati.
Also, one of the team's strengths with Kansas City is their pitching, so try to make a deal like that. Of course, they didn't support him very well, but also he didn't pitch that well. So you know you're going to lose a lot of games when your ERA goes up, and also the amount of runs they score for you. Least supported pitcher in the American League that year.
That's fouled away, and the count 1-1.
Talk about a money pitcher, though. How about his 1985 season when he pitched Game 5 in the League Championship Series against Toronto? He won it. When the Royals were down 3-1, he pitched Game 5 in St. Louis against the Cardinals when the Royals were down 3-1, and the Royals came back to be world champions that year.
Pitched the gem in Busch Stadium that night, exactly.
The night George Brett tumbled into the dugout. Matter of fact. One of those indelible impressions that you never forget, huh?
2-1.
Matter of fact, I think Lee May was with Kansas City then.
Just thinking the same thing.
Yeah,
I can picture Brett sliding into the dugout, and it was May who was able to prevent Brett from almost killing himself. And there's Lee. He was just about in that same spot that night in St. Louis. That's grounded to short. Larkin over to Benzinger for the out. And there are 2 down. I beg your pardon. It's Lenny Harris, who we mentioned is in the game. Harris throwing out Johnson. So with 2 down, Kevin McReynolds coming to the plate.
Excuse me, Al. Lenny from the Miami area. In fact, talking to him, he said he only grew up 10 blocks from Miami Stadium.
What do you want you to do tonight?
Say hello to all 67 of the Harrisons.
By name?
No. I said, I got a good memory, but not that good.
Well, the score is 9-0. We may have room for it.
Right.
1-0 the count. So here goes Lenny in alphabetical order.
Let's see, there's Mom and Dad.
Alice, Bill, Carol. 2-0 the count.
In fact, you got last year, other than Benzinger, you got last year's Nashville AAA lineup starting for the Reds. Brown was the 3rd baseman, and Harris was the shortstop. Quinones was the 2nd baseman. Benzinger played for the other big Red machine, the one up in Boston that led the American League in runs scored.
Rolando Rooms was in the minor leagues in the Cubs chain. Joel Youngblood was with San Francisco, and Jeff Reed started the season with Montreal. Ben Singer himself with the Red Sox.
McReynolds hits it down the left field line, just foul. So Samuel has to go back to second, and Kevin comes back to the plate with the count 2-2 and 2 out on number 22. 9-0 Cincinnati. On a hot night at Shea.
Sure is. Good night, I suppose, if you're coming off of arm injury to come back. And I said, Danny, did you play any simulated games? He said, no, I threw twice in the bullpen. No batting practice. No nothing. Just took some time off. A lot of hot and cold. And go get him.
In the air to right. Rooms almost fell down, but regains his balance, and the side is retired. To the 7th, 9-0 Cincinnati. Reds, as Johnny Mathis would say, chances are Jackson is done for the night. That was a pretty good indication there when your manager shakes your hand after the 6th inning. That's all they wanted from Jackson. And
all he wanted, yes.
Yep, they got more than they expected.
So did he.
Danny, predictably, with that certain smile, too, right?
Yeah, right.
He went down the whole bench and shook their hands for the 9 runs. Thank you. He said it'll be to the 12th of never until I get 9 runs again.
Yeah. Stick around and we'll actually start crooning here in another half an inning. Oh, and 2 the count on Davis, who takes outside. 1-2. Only man in the Reds lineup tonight without a hit.
Would like to join the party.
Well, he can't crash it here. And there's one away. Update now to Corey McCarver.
Right fielder, Rolando Rooms.
Okay, Al, top of the 10th at Pittsburgh. It's 1-all, and watch Brett Butler crush this John Smiley pitch. Glenn Wilson back to the wall. Watch him go up in the air. Just about snares it. They roll it a home run over the yellow line. 2-1 Giants in the 10th.
And a Shea with 1 out. Rolando Rooms is the batter with the count 1 ball and no strikes. So 2-1 with Pittsburgh batting in the bottom of the 10th at Three River Stadium. Sharply on a hop to Johnson. And there are 2 down as Tuffle stays on the bag at first. And Youngblood the batter. Bizarre ending to last night's game in Philadelphia. It didn't end here on Len Dykstra's base hit. And watch the way Paul O'Neill plays this one. Meanwhile, Steve Jeltz goes from 2nd to 3rd and stops there. I'm telling you, if the team's looking for a field goal kicker, that's pretty good. O'Neill figuring the game was over. He had booted the ball. He kicks it back in toward the infield. Imagine his surprise as he stands in to pinch it here when he sees Jeltz at 3rd. And then of all crazy things, the Reds lose the game on a passed ball. O'Neill hits a soft looper into right field for a base hit. So O'Neill hitting for Youngblood, singles with 2 out in the 7th inning, and Brown is the batter.
Talking to Paul before the game, and he said, you know, he knew he had made an error. He had no idea that Jeltz had stopped at 3rd base, and he was kicking in anger, really. And he kicks the ball to Todd Bensinger to hold Jeltz at 3rd. He kicked into the cutoff man. That looked like Pelé on that. Unbelievable.
That's a play. If you try to do that 10 times, you probably couldn't do it once. O'Neill at first, and the pitch is chopped foul by Brown. 1 ball and 1 strike. It's over in Pittsburgh as the Giants on that Butler home run beat the Bucks 2-1. So if the Reds win, they'll remain 6 games back. And Houston has the night off. The Astros would be 2 back. Meanwhile, again, if the Cardinals win and they lead the Dodgers 5-2 in the 6th inning and the Mets lose, the Mets drop to 4th place. 2-1 the count. You know, you sort of got the feeling around here that the Mets weren't that concerned early on, despite the disabling injuries to Hernandez and Carter and some other problems. There was always that feeling, hey, look, we're right there, we're hanging right in there, things are going to get better. But for the first time now, I guess maybe it's Gooden on the disabled list, you sense a little bit more seriousness around the Mets.
Well, you run out of games.
Yeah.
When you got 120 games to go, hey, all kinds of time. Now you're down to the halfway point. Well, it's good, and that's the one thing you can count on. I mean, the one thing about Dwight, he may not win 20 games every year, but he's going to have a great winning percentage. He's going to give you quality innings. And he was a staff leader. Quiet. Everybody said that, you know, since he's had the drug problems, he's matured as a not only as a human being, but as a pitcher, and as somebody they can rely on every fifth day.
And not only have the Mets seen the problems really come to the surface now, but all of a sudden they look at a Montreal team that has significantly helped itself since the beginning of the season, especially in terms of the Langston acquisition and now the recent acquisition of Zane Smith. They see the Cubs as pesky as ever, and they see the Cardinals not dying by any stretch of the imagination. And what about if Whitey Herzog's people get healthy? That's a team that is a very viable contender.
Buck Rogers, the manager of the Expos, with a very prescient comment the first time the Mets went into the Big O in Montreal. He said, you look over to the Mets dugout now and you see that Davy Johnson has the same problems that we do. You used to look over there and realize they were overwhelming. They had too much talent. He said it's not the same anymore. And he's going about proving it right now.
Yeah, that disabled list can be the real equalizer. That combined with lack of timely hitting.
Yeah, they thought next year would be the year of transition. Come a year early. Had to make trades. Had to bring up young people.
Three and 0 to count on Reed. 2 on, 2 out. Innis working in the 7th inning. And Reed taking all the way. Looks at strike one. 3 and 1. O'Neill at second and Brown at first. And the 3-1 pitch to Reed is a strike. 3 and 2. So the runners off and going on the next pitch. 9-0 with O'Neill ready to take off from second. Marty Brown will be on his way from first. 3 and 2 the count on Reed. And that's grounded down to Tuffle, knocks it down, and shovels it to Innis covering, and the side is retired. Reds don't score in the 7th, but remain on top 9-0.
Greatest cyclists in the world continue their pursuit of the yellow jersey in their sports ultimate test, the Tour de France, Sunday on ABC Sports.
Rolando Rooms has a new domicile, you might say. He moves from right to left field as we go to the bottom of the 7th inning. The new center fielder is the one-time Met Herm Winningham, who will be batting in the number 9 spot as Jackson comes out of the game, the pitcher. And Paul O'Neill stays in the game. He hit for Youngblood, batting in the number 6 spot. And the new pitcher for the Cincinnati Reds is Kent Colby, who bats in the number 4 spot with Eric Davis coming out of the game. 48,405 looking on. And Jacoby picking up for Danny Jackson.
You were giving the attendance, and I thought you were talking about Kent's appearances in the Major League. It's not 48,000, but they're a bunch.
Coming close. Tim Tuffle takes a strike.
1,044 appearances for Kent Jacoby. Second all-time and 26 behind Hoyt Wilhelm, who had 1,070.
To the hole, backhanded by Harris, who plants, throws, and gets him. Lenny Harris guns down Tupple for the first out here in the bottom of the 7th inning. And Greg Jeffries the batter. Chance to take a look. We looked at a graphic similar to this a couple of weeks ago. Batting right-handed. That's where he normally hits the ball. Propensity to try to pull it. He comes up here left-handed against Colby. And the pitch.
Week 9, yeah, hitting 253, right-handed 211. And so a chance to listen to the game down in Houston last night, Tim, and you were talking, somebody was talking about the fact that he has walked more. And that's probably because his average has come up. You ever see a hitter that is hitting about 180, which he was about 2 weeks ago, take walks? They want to hit. They don't get anything for a walk. You hit 300 and you walk. You go down to first base, you help your on-base percentage, but you don't help your batting average.
We've talked about it before, and I think it bears repeating. It's hard to get across to a young hitter that if you take more, you hit better. That's a very, very important hitting theory.
And he takes that one, and you heard his response. I think you did. I heard it.
Yep. And of course, that doesn't mean with 2 strikes,
right,
but up to 2 strikes.
Well, he just gets fooled here. Deception, so much of a submariner. Watch that ball come back. It's a strike. Jim Quick is right on the inside corner, has a good view of it, and he just flat out got fooled there.
Yep.
No, Ennis or Colby, they do not overpower you. You just don't see guys throwing from that direction. You talk about frame, you know, where the ball, the window, or where the ball is released. A little bit different on a submariner.
See, the idea behind that whole thing, though, if you take more, then you're working into a better hitting position. You're giving yourself a chance to get ahead of the pitcher, to be in an offensive position to hit.
Grounded to the left side. Over to play it is Brown to throw out Lombardi, and it's a 1-2-3 inning. Jeffrey still barking at Jim Quick. 9-0. Professional boxing, the WBA lightweight title is up for grabs. Former champ Edwin Rosario wants it back, but Anthony Jones has youth and speed on his side. Action from Atlantic City Sunday, 3:30 Eastern, here on ABC Sports. Rosario and Jones. Here it's at the moment Ennis against Colby. I'm reminded of the old Chubby Checker line from the Limbo song. How low can you go? 2 submariners facing each other as Winningham stands in. 0-1.
You know, you bring a point over 1,000 appearances, and if you go to talk to any orthopedist, they'll say the best way to throw is underhand. Eddie Feiner and the king in his court, I saw him when I was about 12 years old. He's still throwing softball. So this is the closest delivery to throwing a softball underhand.
Maybe to Liberty, too.
Yeah.
By the way, you're going to be close to Liberty tomorrow, right? I mean, you're going to the White House.
Yeah, I have a chance to go with baseball alumni, and they're doing something with the 50th anniversary of the Little League.
That's great.
So I have a chance to have lunch.
Sight dropper. Yeah. We were sitting here during the commercial. Palmer's doing, oh, I got to go to the White House.
Yeah,
tomorrow.
really. Right. Only because I have to.
It's all right if I could go and play tennis. I want to play tennis with him.
You have tennis courts there?
Yeah, well, yeah, since President Bush came into office.
Pam Shriver is the head pro. In the air to shallow center field. Here comes Sam Well to take care of Winningham. And there's one away. By the way, when we came on the air tonight, we were talking about the NFL and the owners are meeting in Chicago, and there had been a lot of speculation that by now Jim Finks might be the commissioner of the National Football League, but we have Lynn Swan and a crew in Chicago, and the session is still behind closed doors, and there has been no announcement of any sort. As Quinones takes outside, ball 1-0. And again, as we mentioned at the top, should anything break, we're prepared to bring it to you right away, but there has been nothing from Chicago.
No, seriously, guys, I am thrilled about going. Sam Hughes is going to be there. Gary Carter, maybe Mike Schmidt, Brooks Robinson, a former teammate of mine, and course, Nolan Ryan, apparently, if he pitches a no-hitter, Little League gets $1,250,000 this year as some kind of bonus. So.
And he's missed 3, right? Just missed 3 this year.
Just recently.
Of course, I'll have a chance to be up in Williamsport, as I have for like the last 4 or 5 years, end of August for the Little League World Series. In fact, August 26th. Once again, I will say the American team has a chance against the Far West. And then hope it's not over 21-0 as it was 2 years ago.
I guess the Little League, the initiation of the Little League, the spawning, if you will, back in 1939, easy to remember, the same year, or that it was the first year of the Hall of Fame.
One hopper backhanded by Tuffle, and he takes care of Quinones himself for the second out. And Benzinger will come to the plate.
And Hall of Fame ceremonies coming up, end of July.
And that's a good point, too, and I know it's been discussed recently by many of those in the media, but it's true, the fact that at this time of year, you would figure that so much of the talk and the hoopla in Cincinnati would involve Johnny Bench and his imminent induction. The ceremony's upcoming, and yet because of the Rose situation, it's been relegated to the back page.
And it certainly shouldn't. Yastrzemski coming in from the American League. Johnny Bench.
Harry Carey. Red Shandies. Yep. Umpire Al Barlick.
Yep. Benzinger rips one into center field for a base hit, so Todd is 2 for 5 tonight. And it will bring up Lenny Harris.
The shortstop, number 7.
Bench and Yastrzemski.
Yeah. And talking about Benzinger, he said he's loved playing in Cincinnati, hometown, the chance to go back there. Misses Boston being part of that awesome offense, but had a chance to play every day. Said the only thing's tough is passes. They were pretty tough at Riverfront Stadium. You probably only get your normal allowance.
Bounce down to Johnson, and he goes the short way to Jeffries to the fourth. Cincinnati is done in the 8th. 9-0 Reds at the end of 7.5. We'll return to Shea Stadium after this message and news headlines from our ABC stations.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, it's time right now to play our rock.
To the bottom of the 8th inning at Shea Stadium in New York. Cincinnati 9 and the Mets nothing. And Kevin Elster to lead things off for the Mets. Mookie Wilson is on deck. Go back for Jeff Ennis. And then Juan Samuel. There's Mookie. Kevin Tapani in the Mets bullpen. He'll work the 9th. 1-0 the count. And it's outside, ball 2. Every time the score is 9-0, I'm reminded of my old broadcast partner Lon Simmons with the San Francisco Giants trying to keep the audience one night. And he said the score is San Diego 9 and the Giants 9. Unfortunately, the Giants are playing in German.
Nine to 9.
9 to 9. Grounded to the left side, picked up by Brown, and he throws him out. 1 away. And Mookie Wilson will come to the plate.
Speaking of German, did you see any of the Stephanie Graf, Chris Evert? She did a job on Chris.
6'2", 6'1"?
Yes. I'd say Chris didn't play that poorly. Kind of reminded me of some of our matches in Brentwood.
Oh, yeah, I knew this was coming, pal. Come on, Tim, it's time to go.
I have to play the net right now.
Right.
That would make it fair. Put you on his side.
Yeah. 0-1 the count on Wilson. My time will come, champ.
We'll play on grass if we ever do a game in Baltimore. It'll be the second come. We'll have a little bit of strawberries and cream in the morning. No vegetables, and then we'll go out to Baltimore Country Club and play on the grass. Not tennis, but we'll play on the grass.
If you're just tuning in and wondering what those morons are talking about, it's 9-0. Great stop by Harris, who throws and gets him. So Lenny Harris, who came in to spell Larkin, turns in a beauty. That's the second hit he's taken away from a Met. And it's been that kind of year for Mookie.
Lenny, as we said, a utility player from Miami, said he is unusual as he does a 360
to the right.
No, to the right. Normally just plant. We saw him do that earlier, and then a strong throw. And he was surprised he played as much, but he's happy to he's had an opportunity to do that.
Samuel hits it to center field and right into Winning Williams' glove. All he had to do was stand there. On to the ninth. 9-0. We'll return to Shea Stadium after this word from our ABC stations. The Reds back in 1979 bombed New York 8-0, the most one-sided shutout win for the Reds over the Mets in the history of these franchises. And tonight it's 9-0. The worst defeat the Mets have suffered when being shut out would be 12-0, and that's been accomplished on 4 occasions. Kent Tekulve leading off, and Kevin Tapani, just called up from the minors the other day, starts him with a strike, and the count is 0-1. Mookie Wilson stays in the game in left field, so Tapani bats in McReynolds' spot, number 4. And it's 0-2 on Tekulve. Kind of funny, the shape of this Mets pitching staff right now. With David West starting tonight, we saw West and we saw Innes and Tapani.
Another one of the names mentioned initially to go up to Seattle for Mark Langston.
Yeah. Along with David West.
David West, possibly Sid Fernandez, and Howard Johnson. From what I've seen, even though West struggled tonight, I can see why. Jim Lefebvre, the manager up there, said, hey, we're probably going to lose Langston anyway. Let's get something for him.
Al, you mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast that some of the best deals are the ones you don't make. The Langston deal, I would imagine the Mets are sadder about that. Not only that they didn't get him, but he went to Montreal, and also Seattle. Think of what Seattle would have done with Howard Johnson, David West, Sid Fernandez. Not demeaning by any means Brian Holman and
Randy Johnson.
Randy Johnson, yep. So Seattle's getting 3 pitchers, but the deal they turned down, it's the consensus of opinion, is was the best deal, especially the way Johnson has been the year he's been having. Can you imagine him having that type of year in the Kingdome in Seattle? He'd have 35 home runs by now.
1-1, short dimensions, ball carries.
Well, that's why Jim Lefebvre said second guy that's going to be 40-40, and he was a coach with Oakland, saw Jose Canseco do it last year.
Broken bat looper into left field for a base hit. Rooms has his second hit. And the Reds have 13 hits tonight. So the Reds, who had been struggling, especially offensively, as we mentioned, having lost 16 of 24, scoring only 7 runs in their previous 4 games, breaking out of it tonight with Paul O'Neill at the plate. O'Neill 1 for 1, pinch hit in the 7th inning and single. On 1 to count.
You got to like the bat that Paul O'Neill has. Struggles against lefties. 15 home runs out of his 16 last year off of right-handed pitching.
Toward the hole, and that's a base hit. Tuffle started to go after it, then retreated to the bag. And it gets between him and Jeffries for a base hit into right field. And O'Neill is 2 for 2. And hit number 14 for Cincinnati.
Third baseman, Marty Brown.
Marty Brown comes to the plate. Again tonight, the Reds going with kind of a makeshift lineup. We go back to the start. Pete Rose figuring that he'd really shake it up, so he sits O'Neill down, at least at the outset. Not a bad idea against the lefty like West. He sits Cal Daniels down. He's got to have Bo Diaz on the bench because of his knee. And go figure, 9 runs, 14 hits. The medium deep left center, Samuel takes charge, and he makes the catch, and tagging and coming home without a throw to make it 10-0 is Rolando Rooms. So Marty Brown gets credit for a sacrifice fly, and he has 3 RBIs tonight. O'Neill remains at first base. And Reed comes to the plate.
It's almost one of those nights when you go back and recount it, you think that they had the signs. It's that type of night where, you know, the guys that aren't supposed to hit home runs are leaving their feet. Talking about Quinones, even though he's hit a lot of home runs this year. But normally what happens is you're behind in the count, getting too many balls in the middle of the plate, can't get your breaking ball over, so they sit on one pitch. And the result is a lot of guys go up there and have good swings. Whether you're Rolando Rooms or you're Marty Brown or you're Luis Quinones.
$14 hits, the most allowed by the Mets in any game this season.
Thing about blowouts in baseball, it's not indicative of how you're going to play the whole year. It could be in basketball and could most certainly be in football if you get blown out once or twice, but not in baseball. It's only 1 loss. And because of the length of the season, there's always hope.
Grounded to Tuffle, and he shovels to Tapani for the out, and the side is retired. But in the inning, the Reds add a run and lead 10-0 after 8.5. Al Michaels with Jim Palmer, Tim McCarver at Shea Stadium in New York. Danny Jackson stands to win it. He went 6 innings. Kent DeColvey trying to get the last 3 outs and preserve, if he can, a shutout, which would be the 7th for the Reds this season. Other scores, Cubs win. They beat San Diego 7-3. Giants over Pittsburgh 2-1 and 10. In the 7th inning, the Cardinals lead LA 7-2, and Philadelphia has knocked off Atlanta 4-0. Houston and Montreal with the night off. Mark Carrion in the bottom of the 9th inning hits one by Brown and down the left field line. And Carrion on his way to second is in with a double. And for the Mets, their 4th hit and their first extra base hit. And so a small reward for the very small portion of those who remain. I always thought on a night like tonight, when you've got about 48,000 in the park and it's 9-0, and then you've got about 8,000 at the end, if the Mets were to rally for 11 runs to win it, 48,000 people would say, oh yeah, I was there that night. You wouldn't have believed it.
I have one of those stories. 1964. Leading the Phillies 10-1. The Phillies came back to score 8 runs in the bottom of the 9th inning, and the last out was made when Curt Flood threw out Alex Johnson, trying to stretch a single into a double. We win it 10-9.
Had them all the way.
Had them all the way. Talk about going from totally relaxed to totally tense.
There's Lee Mazzilli on deck. He'll bat for Tapani. Johnson 0 for 3 and hasn't hit the ball out of the infield tonight.
And with Johnson, the hitter, I think to carry that on, Alex Johnson, the last right-handed hitter to win the batting title in the American League other than Carney Lansford. And Alex did it back in 1970. I mentioned earlier how difficult it's been over the last 2 decades for a right-handed batter to win a batting title. But Alex did it in 1970 by percentage points.
Checks his swing, and we'd gotten on that subject earlier talking about Larkin as he battles Gwynn for the batting title.
Tony Gwynn hitting over 400 in the month of June. Just in case anybody forgot about him. Kind of tough to do in the National League, especially if you're a pitcher.
Still 2-2.
I remember Alex Johnson saying, you know, you guys didn't get along with some of his teammates. He told them, he said, you guys hit when you can, I hit when I want to.
Another one of his lines was, trying to tell me something about playing the outfield is like telling Einstein something about science.
I like that.
Alex was not real approachable when it came to playing the game. Instruction.
A little pop-up back of second, and Harris and Quinones are there, and Harris makes the catch. Carry on as at second with 1 away.
As a matter of fact, I sat next to him after I pitched 3 innings in the All-Star game in 1970, and I said, what a nice guy. And then
sweetheart.
You pick up the paper and you read this, and he didn't get along with that, and he didn't hustle. Tell you what, not too many guys from the right-hand side of the plate, we'll have a chance to see Bo Jackson next week, can run to first base from the right side of the plate like Bo Jackson or Alex Johnson.
Alex Johnson in a foot race with Lou Brock in 1968, beat him by 2 strides in the 100. Lou Brock, all he did was steal 960-odd bases.
Lee Mazzilli hitting for Tapani, 0-1. One and one to count. Funny thing, speaking of Gwynn and Larkin and their battle, and they're both in the 350s. There are only 3 guys above 300 in the league right now who at this pace would qualify for a batting title. The third being Will Clark, and Lonnie Smith and Mark Grace are also above 300 but don't have the necessary number of plate appearances, which would play out to the appearances necessary for a batting championship. So when you look in the paper these days, the number 4 hitter is in the 2s. Fouled away, and it's still 1-2.
That's following Tony Gwynn leading the National League in hitting last year with a .313 average, the lowest average ever to lead the National League in hitting.
Of course, he had some injuries, you know, the wrist problem and the thumb. But
right.
So what? Palmero was next at 307, and then Andre Dawson, which was high for them, but low for Tony.
I don't think there's anybody in the National League, and I'm not that familiar with Wade Boggs other than reading about him, not following the American League as closely as the National League. I don't think there's anybody who approaches his job more intelligently than Gwynn. Hard work's one thing, working smart is another. And Gwynn works hard, but as importantly, he works smart.
Well, what he knows, I guess what you're saying, he knows what he has to do, which is pretty much Wade Boggs' theory. You know, he never feels he's in a slump because he doesn't have to really change a lot of things because he pretty much stays the same way. He knows, track record-wise, it's going to be successful. There's another guy, I mean, his lifetime average is around 356. He's only hitting 328, and he's having an off year. The Margot Adams things and like that. It's got to be somewhat of a problem with his concentration. Yet at one point he was hitting 280, so I think he's moving up.
And Mazzilli takes ball 4. So Lee works his way on with a walk here, 1 out in the bottom of the 9th inning. And Tim Tuffle, who is 0 for 3, comes to the plate.
The skill of hitters of that ilk are obviously far above other hitters as far as putting the bat on the ball, but their concentration level is also more powerful, more concentrated. In a game like this, a guy like Rose, Boggs, or Gwynn gets the extra hit. A night where everybody else is thinking about tomorrow, those guys are still thinking about that one at bat. If Pete Rose, for instance, was 3 for 3 in a 9-0 game, regardless of who was ahead in the game, the chances went dramatically up for him to get that 4th hit. Same with Gwynn and Boggs.
Everybody says, why was Pete Rose successful? The big part of the bat on the big part of the ball. Didn't try to hit home runs, even though he could occasionally hit one off being 70 World Series. He was trying to hit a line drive to left field. So what they don't do is try to do something that they can't.
And yet still stay aggressive. That controlled, concentrated aggression that makes good hitters. Really a contradiction in terms when you think about hitting.
But striking that balance. Ball 4 to Tuffle, so the bases are loaded. Speaking of Pete Rose and home runs, the most dramatic home run in his career came in this ballpark. Everybody remembers the day that he and Bud Harrelson got into it at second base, the big fight in the 3rd game of the League Championship Series in 1973. Nobody remembers, and there is Bud Harrelson, the Mets coach, in the opposite dugout. Nobody remembers, with their backs to the wall, the next day, Pete Rose hit a home run in the 12th inning off Harry Parker to keep the Reds alive. Tie the series at 2-2, and the Mets would go on to win it the next day and clinch the pennant. As Jeffries hits one into right field, and the Mets get on the board as Carrion comes in to score. And the bases remain loaded with Mazzilli stopping at 3rd, and it's 10-1.
I'll tell you another day that Pete Rose will remember that he had in this ballpark. The day that on a nationally televised game, NBC was doing the game, on a Saturday when he had 3 home runs here at Shea. And I believe all 3 were off of Craig Swan, who was a terrific right-hander who threw awfully hard for a long period of time for the Mets. Obviously the only time Pete had 3 home runs in a game. And maybe one of the few you could probably count on one hand how many games he had when he hit more than 1.
Tim Burgess gets up in the Cincinnati bullpen as Jacoby tries to get those last 2 elusive outs, and that's grounded down to 3rd. Brown didn't know what to do with it, goes to 2nd for 1, back to 1st, not in time. So the Mets get another run. Brown, for the moment, didn't know whether he wanted to go to 3rd and then to 1st or just what. But at least he gets 1 out. The Mets get a run to make it 10-2, and there are 2 down now.
Actually a good play, but right there the hesitation. You see him look at home, and there does eliminate the double play. You know, he turns it well. We see the 2nd run as Mazzilli comes across the plate. Did cost him a run, possibly.
Yeah, and Mazzilli had held up because he thought the line drive might be caught.
So Kevin Elster comes up with 2 out, runners at 1st and 3rd in the bottom of the 9th inning. The Reds on top, 10-2. And some debris thrown onto the field in left field, creating the momentary delay. Smoke bomb. Maybe it's the humidity. The ground fog. It's humid enough for it.
Couldn't be that. The planes are still flying.
Right.
LaGuardia.
Low to Elster, 1-0.
Isn't it amazing you're trained in this game to always anticipate what's going to happen if the ball's hit to you, and then when it happens, sometimes you forget what you want to do.
Yeah, sometimes the difficulty of the play will make you forget. I think that was the case in Brown's case. He had to smother the ball, and instead of fielding it cleanly, there was that moment of indecision, and you could see him voicing that.
He's still talking about it now.
Yeah.
A little check swing foul, and the count 1-2.
Well, that's the bad news, but the good news is that it happened in a 10-2 ball game.
Goes down on strikes to wrap it up as Jacoby comes out of the bullpen, works 3 innings in relief of Danny Jackson, and Rose's Reds come into New York to win the opener of a 4-game series from the Mets. The final score 10-2. Luis Quinones hits 2 homers. Rolando Rooms hits a home run. Danny Jackson comes off the DL for the victory. And the Reds rout the Mets tonight by a score of 10-2. Meanwhile, as far as the NFL's commissioner situation is concerned, to Chicago now, an update from Lynn Swan.
Thank you, Al. I'm standing here with Jim Irsay, who is general manager for the Indianapolis Colts. And what we thought was going to be a confirmation of Jim Finks as a commissioner turns out to be a long meeting and no decisions at this point. What is going on, Jim?
Well, I think a lot of discussions happening right now, Lynn. Again, we talked about it earlier. It's a big decision to make, and right now they're addressing many issues in there, and I think at this point it could go on a lot longer.
There may or may not have been a vote, you were saying earlier, and you're discussing a lot of procedures. The selection committee of 6 came in with 1 name. Was that a political mistake?
Oh, I don't think so. Again, I don't think that. I think it's a very positive situation there right now. You have a group of the 28 owners that are meeting, and they're discussing a lot of key issues and plotting the future of this league. And the Roselle era is coming to an end, as everyone knows, and it's a very important time at this point to make sure whatever decision is made as far as the next commissioner and the structure and the direction we're going has to be the right one. So it's not surprising it's a long process.
Jim Finks is very qualified, but he is 61. The commissioner stepping down at 62. Is this maybe the problem in terms of his age? Can he go the distance?
I really don't think that's a big issue at this point. I think everyone wants the right candidate for the NFL to be picked, whether he's 61 or 41. And again, Reagan was 78 when he stepped down, so he did a good job for the country.
Okay. Jim, thank you very much. Al?
All right, thank you, Lynn. So you're right up to date on what's taking place in Chicago, and here at Shea Stadium in New York, the Cincinnati Reds roll into town and roll over the New York Mets by a score of 10-2. They are still 6 games back of San Francisco in the National League West, and the Mets have now dropped to 4th in the National League East. So a small victory tonight for Pete Rose and the Cincinnati Reds as they win it by a score of 10-2. Saturday on ABC's Wide World of Sports, top Soviet and Romanian gymnasts compete in the European Women's Gymnastics Championships. Plus, the chase for the yellow jersey continues with same-day coverage of the Tour de France. Next week on ABC's Thursday Night Baseball, Bo Jackson and the Royals take on the New York Yankees, or you'll see Kirk Gibson and the Dodgers hosting St. Louis. Now stay tuned for ABC News Nightline following your late local news.
ABC's Thursday Night Baseball has been brought to you by Kellogg's All-Brand Cereal and by Budweiser. Beechwood Age for that clean, crisp taste. This Bud's for you. This has been a presentation of ABC Sports, recognized around the world as the leader in sports television.